always remember when I did not understand how I used to stand under all the fool's rules running these lands. I had my head in the sand and I was asleep. Now I learn a little more every day, and I'm waking the sheep. Gonna say it out loud, say it proud, get it out, 'cause I'm burning inside, cannot hide it no more. I'm a raconteur too. Yeah, I'm a raconteur too. Oh, I'm a raconteur too. Oh, the people in the chat room singing. Oh, I'm a raconteur too. One more time now. Oh, I'm a raconteur too.
Hello and welcome to Raconteurs 2. I'm your host, Aid Hardy, otherwise known as Captain Cliche, here to remind you that this world belongs to all of us, not just you. If you're listening on YouTube or the podcast, you can catch me live on Mondays, 7 till 9 p.m. That's UK time at raconteursnews.com, where all the previous shows are available as podcasts. If you're listening live tonight, join me in the chat room with any questions or comments for my guest or myself. Well, the Skype gremlins have got us again. We've spent the past to get our guest on Skype, and I'm fingers crossed hoping that she's with us. Louise, can you hear us?
I can.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
I just want to massive thanks to Andy Young and Kev, who have both been working the socks off for the past 2 hours trying to get Louise's laptop up and running, and we haven't quite. And we've actually called her on a telephone via Skype, so it is a bit of a cheaty tonight. But anyway, hopefully. So, where are we? Well, let's call this Frack off. Up to. Last time we did a fracking show, we had a young lady on by the we did say at the time it wasn't a real name. Castro was with us tonight. So what I want to do, Louise, just a very quick background to you, just for, say, a minute or so, just so that anybody who's not listened to the previous shows just got an angle. Hello?
Hello, you keep fading out again, but so a little bit about me. I was at Danes Hill on my days off at the weekend, where Dart Energy were drilling, doing the exploratory drill there. I then went from there to West Newton, a little tiny place in Holderness, where Rattling Energy had undertaken a core drill in 2013, and then received planning permission to do what they called a mini fall-off test, which is effectively a mini frack, and they were doing that in the Boland Shale. I was camped down there for a while, and then when they packed up, I've been fighting them ever since, really, through planning and various other legal organisations, I suppose, legal bodies, the council.
Right, so but I do know that you've been an activist on lots of things for many, many years. Yeah,
I'm not. You make me sound like I'm a renting activist. No, I have done. Yes, I started with the poll tax many, many years ago, and from there, really anti-nuclear, anti-Trident, up at Faz Lane, Menwith Hill. Palestine's particularly close to my heart. So, yes, and that's the things I concentrated on. And I think that fracking or hydraulic fracturing is related to the nuclear in so many ways, because obviously it's an unconventional, as they like to call it, form of mineral extraction. They use nuclear, the radioactive chemicals, and some of them are a byproduct of the nuclear waste. So, yeah, it's through nuclear fission. So I think it was a natural progression, really.
Yeah, yeah. And I know when we've sort of been chatting, for you, it's really just about, well, what I say at the beginning of every show, which is the world belongs to all of us, not just the chosen few. And that really is where you're coming from. Now, when you were on last time, Lou, I sort of said there was a couple of sites not far enough. There have been things happening, but you, even though you're miles away, the other side of Hull, you seem to know me than I do. So could you just explain what's actually going on around the corner from me?
Yes, I can. To some degree. Obviously, I'm not an expert on what's happening because I haven't looked into it as much as I have with rattling energy out here. But what you have is INEOS, and they're drilling near Hart Hill on Common Lane down there. Yep. They've just submitted their planning application to the council. They have, they are undertaking seismic testing at the moment, 3D and 2D seismic testing, and what they said on their planning application, the planning notice that appeared before the application went in, was that they wanted to drill a listening well. Now, technically, and also run what they've called a pressure transient test. Now, really, it is semantics again. The oil and gas industry use double speak continually to make it sound as though it's not much at all. So a listening well, if you Google it, you get absolutely nothing. There is nothing at all about a listening well. We know they're drilling into the shale. They have said they're drilling round about, I think they've said 2,200 metres into the shale. But as far as I'm aware, that every time an oil and gas company have said, we're going into the shale and we're going to be drilling this far, they go further because they always use approximately or about. So we never really know how far they're going to drill. I have done a Freedom of Information request before as to how far Rattling drilled. And I did that to the Oil and Gas Authority, which is a government department. But I was told that's confidential information. Try again in 7 years' time. So I know there's no point asking because they're just not going to release the information. It's commercially sensitive, is how they label it. Yes, and it covers a multitude of sins. What it really means is they're not going to tell you anything. So a listening well. What exactly is a listening well? So after much searching and research, which I do need to complete and finish, technically, it's a well that has been used extensively, particularly in America. And they use these type of wells. You can look at it actually, if you start Googling observation well rather than listening well, what you begin to see is these observation wells are used to test the pressure. So they will be running their pressure transient test, I guess, will be similar to what they would term a defit or a mini frack or a mini fall-off test, where they insert the fluid into the well, hold it at pressure to see what point the earth will fracture. And then they will know what to use to hydraulically fracture. Now, observation wells are generally found where you would get multi-well pads or lots of wells within a small area, and they're listening for changes and observing what's happening in that area. And that would be my guess is what they're going to use the listening well for. And the next step, after they've drilled the well, they will suspend the well. If they find that it's favourable pressure, they will then go on to drill more wells and hydraulically fracture.
So that's more wells on the same site?
Could well be. It's quite a large site at Hart Hill. It's bigger than an acre. Wells are only small. People imagine them to be huge, but they're not. They can be at the top, maybe top of the well 6 or 7 inches. They are quite small. And you can fit 40, 60 wells on one pad because they are so small. And the reason they drill the multi-well pads is because you can have a pad with lots of wells on it, but it isn't classed as a multi-well pad. A multi-well pad is done to save money. And what they do is they bring in the core drilling rig, which is generally around about 60 metres, 50, 60 metres high, 50, I think will be the one at Hart Hill. And what they do is they drill the wells all at the same time, and it's to save money. So they do lots of core drills all at the same time, and that then becomes a multi-well pad. So, yeah. And of course, sorry, you were going to say, and this is all...
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say... Great.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Just about. You keep fading in and out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Louise. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so what I was going to then go on to say was what INEOS are doing is quite close to my heart. Because out here in Yorkshire, apart from Rattling Energy that have the license, the pedal license, the Petroleum Exploration and Development License 183, which covers the whole of Holderness, it's the largest pedal in the UK. INEOS own the other pedals in Yorkshire. Now, INEOS have near Hull a chemical plant that they share with several other firms, but majority is now INEOS, called Saltend. And what they do is they extract the polymers from the shale gas to use in plastic and things. Now, recently, they imported the shale gas on a tanker from Pennsylvania. So they brought it into their Grangemouth plant or processing plant. And from Grangemouth in Scotland, there's a direct pipeline that runs to Saltend. And so they just pipe it straight in. Now at West Newton, what they've done is they've done an 18-month extension of the pipeline. And that pipeline now goes virtually into Saltend, runs near Drax, but it also goes into a place at Aldeburgh. Now, the Aldeburgh gas storage caverns, there is 9 of them. Each of them are twice the size of St. Paul's Cathedral, and that stores the gas. And if there's a demand in the system, that is linked directly into the domestic and commercial usage supply, and they take the gas and it's pumped directly into your home or to your place of business. So what I think is that INEOS will drill and extract the shale and cut out the middleman. The excess will then, I think, and I can't say because they're not going to say this, but I presume will then be sold onto the open market. So for INEOS, it's really a huge money-saving thing, because although initially the cost of drilling the wells is expensive and extracting the shale, but presumably it's an awful lot cheaper than tankering it over by boat from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right.
And Saltend is huge.
Yeah, we've got that
and
side.
Very dirty.
Sorry, say it again.
I said Saltend is huge and extremely dirty. It's horrible to see. It's got the big chimneys. At night, it's all lit up. Exactly the same as any power station. Yeah, it's huge. And there's been a few incidents there over the years when it was owned by BP and things.
So Saltend, that's the one out sort of just beyond him.
Yes.
Okay. I understand we're having a couple of issues with my sound at the moment. Is that still correct?
Yes, it is. You keep fading in and out, but I'm sort of having to guess in between what you're saying.
Yeah, we've got Andy Young producing for us tonight. I'm going to ask Andy if he'll play a tune, and I'm going to log out of the call and back in again and see if that cures anything.
Sure, Aid.
Okay,
we can.
fab.
No problem, Aid. We can
Toby's
do.
Listening. Andy, you there?
Yeah, no problem, Aid. I can do that, mate.
No, we really are having gremlins tonight, aren't we?
Yes.
It's...
Oh,
well,
sorry.
I can hear you at the
Oh,
moment.
hang on a minute.
Yeah, Aid, I can play you a tune now.
Yeah, if you can play us a tune, mate, I'm going to kill this call, and if you can call me straight back, mate, that'd be good.
Will do.
Okay, cheers. Okay, and I understand we should be back live now with the chat. Hopefully my voice is sorted. Louise, can you hear me?
I can. Loud and clear.
So it's a lot better. Yay!
I know. Haven't we had some difficulties?
Yeah, we have. Just before we carry on, I just want to say that I've never ever known a group of people who were all in for helping each other. And this often happens where we get techie issues and stuff. And so we had Kev on earlier, who was an absolute Trojan, and he's going to be, I understand, trying to sort Louise's laptop out later as well. So for all of those people who get involved, the other thing I just wanted to say as well is, just recently we've had a couple of Raconteurs new specials. So keep your eye on the website, guys. There are some Raconteurs new specials out as podcasts, and I understand there might even be another one later this week. Fingers crossed with Jason. So anyway, stick with that. So we're here, Raconteurs 2. We're talking to Louise Castro tonight with a Frack off update. And Louise was just explaining about multi-well pads and also how the gas at the moment is getting into the country. But it's often arriving at the moment on a big tanker. And obviously what Ineos and other gas companies are trying to do is dig it out the ground next to your house. Louise, I was speaking to somebody fairly local to me a couple of days ago. And I said to them, Andy, do you want to mute your mic, mate?
Sorry, mate.
Thank you. It's all right. And I was talking about fracking to them. And they said, oh, yeah, it doesn't matter because I live about 6 miles from the nearest one. What would you say to them?
Oh, they have no idea. No idea. The traffic alone is horrendous. If you think it's going to stick to the planned route, have another think, because they will route it in wherever they can. And also, what people don't understand is fracking is done, they drill horizontally, and then they tick off and go vertically. Now, the big issue where you are is, well, there's a couple of things really. The longest hydraulic fracture in the world was 15 miles long.
Wow.
So, make no mistake, these are not short horizontals. Some of them can be really long. A lot of those, the much longer ones are used when they're drilling onshore but extracting offshore, because it's between 3 and 100 times cheaper to drill onshore than it is to drill offshore. So many of those really long fractures are used. But the big problem you have around Hart Hill, Nottingham area as a whole, Derbyshire, when it comes to them, if they do get that far, the big issue you have is that obviously it was a coal mining area, and there's a lot of seams. Now, the seams have only been recorded, and I can't remember the exact date, but obviously not for time immemorial. So there's a lot of seams that have been dug out that actually nobody knows where they are and what's in these seams. So if you're hydraulically fracturing, you don't know what you're going to hit. You know, there's anything down there. So, yeah, it could be. I mean, I actually think in this country, as in all countries, it's a disaster waiting to happen, but everybody thinks it's worth it. I think one of the major things that people don't understand and haven't much awareness of is that in 2015, David Cameron introduced an act to Parliament, and it was called the Infrastructure Act. Now, in that act, he redefined hydraulic fracturing, and he set the bar at, in terms of fluid, so much fluid per frac. Now, what this really means is, to you and I, is that 46% of all wells that have been drilled in America are now, that people have openly stated, this is being hydraulically fractured and no longer classed in the UK as having been hydraulically fractured. Now, at Priest Hall up on the Fylde near Blackpool, when Quadrilla did the only high volume hydraulic fracture there, it caused multiple earthquakes, 2 of which are quite large and caused damage. The well was suspended and all work was suspended. Quadrilla have now been given the green light to go ahead and are re-drilling up on the Fylde at Preston New Road at the moment. The drill hasn't gone in yet to do the core drill, but they are going to be carrying on. Now, that in itself is worrying because at Priest Hall, it was openly stated, this is a high-volume hydraulic fracture by Quadrilla, and that was accepted. Under Cameron's redefinition of hydraulic fracturing, the well at Priest Hall would no longer be classed as hydraulic fracturing because the volume of fluid is below the bar that Cameron has set.
Mm.
Now, you're with me so far, yeah? Because it is a bit mind-blowing that some man can pass a bill in Parliament in the UK that redefines high-volume hydraulic fracturing or hydraulic fracturing and sets it at such a high bar that 46% of all wells in the USA that have been acknowledged as having been hydraulically fractured are no longer classed that way. The other worrying thing is in all the debacle, and I can only say debacle, that Mayhem has brought in, Theresa May has brought in when she went to election, and then they produced their manifesto that said nothing. Technically, it wasn't costed or anything else, but the one thing the manifesto did say that has never been talked about openly, really, and has been totally glossed over, is the fact that they want to remove all planning permission for anything that isn't government defined as hydraulic fracturing.
Do you know, this is quite interesting, Louise, because while we were actually on with Kevin, was desperately trying to sort your laptop out remotely, he said, isn't fracturing illegal? You said, technically, yes. And then he said, well, how are they getting away with it then? And this is basically what you're going through now. How the bloody hell are they getting away with this?
Well, they do. And technically in this country, it isn't illegal. In many European countries, it is. But because it's not an EU ruling that it's illegal. And I mean, that's going to be irrelevant for us anyway, because obviously we're not going to be we'll still be part of Europe, but we will no longer be in the European Union.
Well, if that ever happens, but yeah.
Well, Brexit talks started today. But the awful thing is that by coming out of the European Union, all these safeguards are no longer there. And we are going to lose so much. And given the incidents that have been happening over the past weeks with, people call them terrorist attacks, I would like to think they're murders. And Theresa May has openly said, we are going to bring in the Snoopers Charter, and they will. In the Infrastructure Act, they limited protesting. And I think this will give the Conservative government depending how the Queen's speech goes on Wednesday, this will give the government a legitimate right to stop protesting. Now, the thing is with fighting hydraulic fracturing of any description or anything to do with gas, oil, it's classed as infrastructure. So by fighting and protesting against hydraulic fracturing, you are openly classed as a terrorist. So for people like myself or anybody else who is not writing a letter about planning, but anybody else who is actively protesting, organising, getting their communities together to fight fracturing, hydraulic fracturing, that means they are also going to be classed as terrorists. Now, for somebody like myself and other activists that have been very active, I wouldn't like to say high profile because we're not high profile, but for people like us, we're classed in exactly the same category as people like Abu Hamza. And we're covered under those same rules. So, you know, the police investigation rules, that means they can monitor everything we can do legally, everywhere we go. They can access our internet, our emails, and this is all legitimate because they class us as terrorists because we're fighting infrastructure. This is
Louise,
crazy.
My people have heard me say this a lot. My way of doing things is just basically tell them you reject it. You know,
Yes,
I'm not on any electoral register or whatever. I don't do that. I don't vote. I don't have anything to do with it. Basically, so that I can, at my will, write to them and say, I reject.
Yes.
Now, going on what you've just said, does that mean that the way I would do it is the better way forward? Does it mean that, I don't know what question I'm asking really. What are your thoughts?
To be honest with you, we are policed by consent. And
Yep.
you can say, I do not consent to be policed. But because we're classed as terrorists, it's irrelevant. I know, it's stunning, isn't it? That here I am, 56-year-old tree hugger, whatever you want to call me, quite passive. You know, I give out a bit of information, serve a bit of tea and a bit of cake, and I'm classed as a terrorist, a domestic extreme terrorist, because we're fighting infrastructure. So, yes, we can all say, I do not consent to be policed. But it doesn't make a difference because under government legislation, because we're fighting infrastructure, we are domestic extreme terrorists. So it doesn't matter how much we say, hang on, I don't want to be policed by consent, I do not give my consent. They can ignore all that because the legislation is in place that means they just bypass whatever you say.
No, what my thought is I've heard you say that if you put your name on a what's the word I'm looking for, on a thing where loads of petition, that only classes as one complaint.
Yes, that's right.
Even though there might be 50,000 signatures on it.
Yes. You can take it to Parliament, it can mean something different, but if you hand it into your council as opposition to planning, it classes as one complaint. It's exactly the same as writing a letter for planning. If you object to planning, whether it be for a well, housing or anything, any development that is going on in your area, if you write a letter and object, if people give out lots of standard letters and say, sign this, send it into the council, we must all write in, that's fair enough, but the council will look at all those. They will register each letter as an objection, but what they will do is take the salient point from one letter and use that point. When a planning application goes before the council, the planning officer that is employed by the council presents if you like, a report on the application, any experts that they've consulted, and any objections. Mm-hmm. Now, they can list all the objections, but if you've got 500 letters and each one says the same thing, you've literally got one objection. Does that make sense? Because you're only making one comment from an overall viewpoint. If you write your own letter, and there's 2, 3 people, 4, 6 people in your household, and you all sign that one letter, that also is classed as one objection. What everybody needs to do is write the letter from their point of view on how it will affect them and submit individually. That way, if every letter has, different things on how it will directly affect you. So if your house is on the well site, en route to the well site, write how it's going to impact on you. And then that has to be noted in the document, in the report that the planning officer then submits to the planning committee. So the planning officer is a paid-for employee of the council. The planning committee is made up of elected council members.
Right.
Is that as clear as mud, or is that quite...
No, people, we need to know this because, they're turning us into terrorists, and we're not.
Yes.
Like you say, we just want to live peacefully. Leave us alone. And
I agree with you, and I think the hard part is that unless you've lived through it, you cannot know the destruction that this industry causes. We can never prove anything because everything is kept secret and hidden.
Hello? No, I think we've lost our guest, Louise. I don't know if you can get her back on, Andy. Hello?
Yeah, sorry, the call looks like it's dropped. I'm just trying to call her back now.
Yeah, we're definitely having Skype gremlins tonight and echoes and all sorts of things.
Hello?
Oh, we're back on again.
I've got you back now. Yes. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened then. I lost you. Well, the line went dead. So, for example, at West Newton, when Rathline did, although they denied doing the mini frack, we have evidence they did do it, despite what Rathline say. They collect. They're only running a test to see at what point the earth will fracture. So when they run the test, they do collect some waste gas. So what they do is they burn off, because it's not treated. When you extract gas from the ground, it has to be treated in order for commercial use, so domestic or commercial use. And they add things like the smell and various other things, which is why you have the big processing plants. Now, obviously, when they do these mini fracks, mini fall-off tests, defits, whatever they want to call them, they collect the waste gas and they hold that in tanks. And what they do is they burn off the gas. It is illegal in this country to cold vent the gas unless it's an emergency.
In other words, if they're letting gas out, it's got to be burnt.
Exactly. So at West Newton, they used what they called a single covered stack. And what should have happened was there should have been an ignition to ignite the gas so that it would flare off.
Oh dear.
Sorry, I'm choking now. Hang on. Talking too much. So West Newton. I know I seem to have been chatting all day. At West Newton, they should have used what they called a single covered stack. So you know the pictures you see with the flames coming out the top of the chimney?
Yeah.
Well, that isn't what happens with a single covered stack. It burns off, and do you just see no flame? But they had issues with pressure at West Newton continually, and the gas didn't burn. There wasn't enough pressure to ignite the gas. So technically, the gas was what they call cold vented, and it was just let out to the atmosphere. Now, when they did that, there was all sorts of problems. Residents continually reported it, but the EA only went in retrospectively. So the Environment Agency get a call from somebody to say, there's a dreadful smell, I'm being sick. The EA then make an appointment with Lachlan and go into the well.
They have to
make they don't turn up. Yeah, they don't turn up unexpectedly. They make appointments in advance to go into the well site.
My God.
So what happened was, every time the EA went down, Rathlin weren't flaring. So also what happened, they should have had an emissions strategy to test what the gas was that was coming out. But there was all sorts of issues about this, where Rathlin didn't have the right testing things. They were using Tegla bags to try and capture the gas. This wasn't working. So whatever was cold vented out of that well at West Newton, nobody knew what was in there. Now, they call the people that live by the well sites, you're not people, you're not residents, you're receptors. So you're dehumanized totally from the whole system if you live by the well. So you're a receptor, not a human being. So the people living closest to that well site, the lady that lived at the top of the road, I mean, this was in The Guardian, quite high at the time, quite high profile in The Guardian, that people around the well site were being violently ill. So all the things you hear out in America, you know, people that live by the well sites that say, I've come out in a rash, I'm being sick, I've got a sore throat, itchy eyes. This happened to those people there that lived near that well. And nobody knows what's in that gas. The lady that lived at the top of the road, maybe 6 minutes walk away from the well site, she came out in a rash, and since then, I mean, she had type 1 diabetes, which she'd had for 20 years. We cannot link what is wrong with her now to the gas, but she was fine. She used to come down to camp every day, bring us water, sometimes 2 or 3 days. She'd bake cakes for us. You know, she was okay. She was over, you know, she was over 60, so she wasn't in full, you know, bloom of life. You know, she wasn't young, but she certainly was not unfit. Since she's moved away, I will tell you, I went to see her the other day. The rash is still there. Nobody can diagnose what is wrong with her, and that lady can't even walk now. She just cried. I cried. She cried when I saw her last, and she said, "I'm so tired. I'm so sick of this." She can't sleep. She's desperately ill, and nobody knows what is wrong with her, and more importantly, can't say that it's linked to the site because nobody knows what was released. Now, this same lady one day was hanging her washing out. She'd hung her washing out to dry. She brought it in. They'd been cold venting the gas, and her washing stank. She rang up Rathlin, who said, "Hey, we're very sorry. We'll have it dry cleaned for you."
So, Louise, there's lots
and
of
this is it.
There's lots of what we could call anecdotal evidence where, you know, you yourself have seen, met, and seen the real effects of this. Has anybody actually done any studies or reports or published anything like that?
No, nobody does anything. The MEDAC report has come out, but that's based on America. Nobody, Public Health England haven't done anything out here. Nobody has. I will tell you another incident where the resident who lived, the lady I've been talking about, she lived on, as you're walking up the lane from the well site, the lady I've just been talking about lived on the left-hand side, On the right-hand side, there was another resident who has now moved. And she had never had a breathing problem before, ever. When Rathling were cold venting the gas, she went to the doctors with breathing issues and was prescribed an inhaler. When Rathling closed down the well site, miraculously, she didn't need the inhaler anymore and her breathing is back to normal. Now, she has subsequently moved because Rathling have planning permission to put in another well at West Newton A. Obviously, they haven't yet because we keep holding them up, and financially, they're not in a good position now, which brings us into a whole different situation. But she said, I could not face it. I was so ill. I have never had breathing difficulties in my life. I cannot risk living there any longer. I can't face the traffic. I can't face the police. I can't face the issues that arise. And her last words were, the last time I spoke to her, whatever you do, keep up the fight.
So have they actually sold the house and moved now then?
She has moved, yes, she has. In fact, there's been quite a lot of moves out of the area. And people are losing money on the houses. I mean, one resident at West Newton lost $250,000. The lady that I told you about that's really poorly, when she moved, hers was a much lesser value house, but less important for the sale price because obviously she's not a wealthy person. She'd lived in there over 30 years. She brought her children up at that house and she lost, I think, 24% of her house sale. Yeah, people are moving all over. People do not want to live through it again.
What about people in the area who are trying to get mortgages? Anything happening with that?
Yeah, and interestingly enough, they go through, when they on the traffic planning route, the traffic management planning route for West Newton A, goes through a little village of Ellaby, which is maybe 3-4 miles away.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman there that had his house on the market for a couple of years. He managed to get a buyer not so long ago. And this is even though Rathling still aren't doing anything and haven't gone in again. He got a buyer. Now, they did the normal survey and search. The survey came back with a couple of faults, nothing major, a bit of a guttering needed fixing and something else as minor as that.
Yeah.
However, what was then said was, the bank said, however, they are drilling within 5 miles of your house. We will not give anyone a mortgage on this property. And they're not alone. The Bank of Santander, the lady that moved, I told you, that's so poorly, the people that were buying her house really struggled. Santander refused to give a mortgage on it because it is so close to the well site. So please do not let anybody say that it's not an issue. This impacts on every level of your life. Insurance is difficult. They won't, out here at West Newton, I can't speak for everywhere else. I can only speak for West Newton. But out at West Newton, people are not insured because of anything related to drilling or seismic testing activities. Now, the nearest we've come is, I'm trying to think of the name of it. One insurance company did say, we will not pay out, but if any damage is caused and you suspect it's from hydraulic fracturing, we will take the company to court. And you could be held up for years. And we know this because in 2015, Rathling undertook a massive program of seismic testing out here, which actually damaged over 400 properties. These people are not insured. And if Rathling don't pay out, your only course of redress is to go through the court. Because it's a civil matter, they can draw this out for as long as they want. So I mean, your house can be falling down around your ears.
That seismic testing is what's about to start happening, say, in Harthill.
Yeah, they've already started. They've got the vibrosis machines ready to go in, as I understand. They've started laying the plastic tubing, and the depth charges. Yeah. I'm not saying that it will happen. There's two schools of thought, interestingly enough, about why it happened at West Newton and the surrounding area. But over 200 properties that we know of were damaged. One severely. One was moving. He didn't get a payout. He's currently, with a whole group of other residents, currently trying to take Rattling to court, but have been told by the solicitor, do not speak about it. It's not subjudicious because it is civil, but they're still not allowed to talk about it. So, yeah, some people were paid out, mainly people on Burton Constable land, who, funnily enough, Rattling gave Burton Constable the cheque. Burton Constable paid out the residents. But these residents had windows blown out. They were just sitting there and the windows just blew out of their accommodation. Yeah.
They had windows blown out?
Yeah. When the seismic testing charges go off, there was like a loud explosion, and they live in they are, I suppose, quite upmarket chalets. These places are not cheap, believe me. They're very luxurious, but yeah, the windows were blown out.
Wow.
And the gentleman at Whiten, whose house, he had a business, his fishing lake, he said it was like pulling the plug on it. His house is still moving. Technically, what happened was there was a loud bang from the seismic testing. The first charge went off. His house literally shook. So he went running up the road and spoke to somebody from Rattling. Caroline Foster, who's the chief off-site engineer, spoke to her. She went back to his property, rang the people doing the seismic testing and said, okay, let off the charge. The charge went off as she was standing in the kitchen on the phone to them, and they had an Aga, big Aga in their kitchen. The Aga literally lifted off the floor and settled back down again. That was the extent of the power of what happened. She was on the phone to him and said, whatever you do, stop the testing, don't let it off. And they said, we can't, we've come too far. And they let off another charge. Now, subsequently, Rattling denied having been in that house. And they did visit on different occasions after this event went on, and they denied that as well. Unfortunately for them, this was a business that had CCTV.
Oh.
But they're still delaying it in court. Now, what they think happened is, the cracks are immense. The bungalow is still moving. If you walk in it, you can hear it creaking. I mean, these people have had to move out now, and they're living in what I can only be described as a little shed. But they've nowhere else to go. And he has terminal cancer. It's heartbreaking. But what really happened was, if you can imagine this, the house lifted off the ground and then settled back down again. And the roof literally moved. And the bungalow is still moving. And the only solution is to demolish the whole thing and rebuild it on a different footprint.
And for anybody listening who sort of joined in halfway through that, this isn't the fracking. This is just the seismic testing that will tell them where not to drill.
Exactly. And the issue, the thing is as well, the government still the last statement from the government about seismic testing was, it is a non-invasive process. There is nothing, and you don't need planning permission for seismic testing. You don't have to notify anybody, really.
So there's no official report, basically, because if there was, it would damn it.
Absolutely.
Well, Harthill as a village, some of you listening may know it, some of you won't. I've lived in this area for about 28 years. And I was a financial advisor, and I used to have some quite wealthy customers in Harthill before I left the industry. And it's built, as all the villages are in this area, above various coal seams. Now, I've been in several houses in Harthill where when you're actually just stood in the house, you can feel that the floor actually slopes. And that's because of the subsidence that's been caused by the coal seams moving underneath the houses. Now, I do know that quite a lot of years ago, more than 10 years ago, a lot of these houses were shored up effectively and stopped moving. Now, if they do go ahead with this seismic testing, I hate to use the word interesting because this is people's lives and people's homes. This isn't just bricks and mortar. But
no,
surely this has to have an impact on people. And if anybody listening thinks, "Oh, this is just not going to affect me," trust me, it is. It's going to affect everybody.
Oh, definitely. And you might be lucky. You might not have any damage from the seismic testing. I was talking to somebody the other day or the other night, and really interesting, doing geology. And he was saying, out here in Holderness, it's what they call reclaimed land. It's very similar to what they have in the Scandinavian countries, particularly Holland. Mm. And we have lots of drainage ditches out here and things like that for the flooding, which has to be kept in order. Now, we have a huge chalk level, which is where the aquifer is, right at the top of the earth has different layers, and it's right at the top layer is the chalk aquifer. And he was saying the seismic testing could have caused something, because this chalk aquifer is highly permeable.
Yes.
And it's fed from up above through the ground, from rain, but also from the sea as well. And because it is so highly permeable and has a lot of water in it, he said it could be the seismic testing didn't hit a fault, but caused like a shockwave in the water, in the chalk layer, to run through. So I haven't looked at that yet, but I really want to look at that, because that's a whole different take on it. Mm-hmm. Because if it is affecting aquifer and chalk level in that way, there are aquifers out near you.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember watching the YouTube stuff a few years ago about the fracking in America, and there were people turning the tap on and setting fire to it.
Oh, yes, where they say that isn't true and it's already in there. Well, a little anecdote for you here, another one. Lady that lived at the top of the road from, this was in 2013, following the core drill, Rattling ran some pressure tests. Now, she said she turned on her tap and her water was running grey. So she rang Yorkshire Water, who supply our water, and they said, no, there's no reason for that. We've had no reports. Yours is the only one. She drove down to the well site and spoke to one of the drill workers there. He'd no car, because they drive them in from wherever they're staying. These workers are all brought in from elsewhere. So they're all put up in bed and breakfast accommodation or hotels. They're just driven in. So the thing about local employment, forget that. All you get is 0-hour contract security guards, many of whom don't actually want to be there. So the drill worker got in her car, and this lady drove her to the top of the road. He came in, turned on the tap, collected it in a bottle, and then tried to set fire to it and said, "Oh, there's no gas in there, and you can drive me back now."
Lou, we've got some comments in the
extent of their concern.
Yeah. Lou, we've got some comments in the chat room, a couple very poignant, quite interesting. The first one from Paul Sturm: Amber Rudd's hooked to her fracking neck in this shit.
Absolutely.
So tell us about Amber Rudd.
Absolutely. Amber Rudd. And Andrea Leadsom, of course. Mm-hmm. They all have a vested interest. Theresa May, the whole lot of them. This is not about energy security. This is about purely and simply pushing fiat currency around. It's a myth when they say our gas comes from Russia. It does not. We get over 60% of our gas directly piped in from Norway on the Langeled pipeline and the Fjord pipeline, and the Nord pipeline, and they go directly into Easington here, where it's processed and then delivered out. This is solely about money. This is not feasible in this country. It's not financially viable. It will not reduce your bills. These people are up to their neck in it, and it is solely about money. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I can remember I can remember in 1970 something, was it the Queen, or Beryl as I call it, and I think it was Margaret Thatcher, when they switched on the oil pipeline, and they said, oh, this will save the country thousands and millions of pounds. Yeah, it saved us absolutely nothing.
No, it's just not true. It's not true at all. And the awful thing is they know this.
Yeah.
They know. And we're not like America. We have, and Australia as well. I mean, people individually, towns and villages have been affected. And yes, initially, this does bring in high revenue. It has reduced gas prices, but we cannot produce on that scale. And more importantly, do we want to? If you look at the aftermath of what happens in these places, in these countries, and these villages that are affected by this, you get a sudden influx of hundreds of these workers. They house them in great big huge trailers. They drive them out. These towns that are normal little sleepy villages like I live in are suddenly inundated with these drill workers who are paid a lot of money. I mean, they're paid hundreds of pounds a day to be down at that well site. They have expendable income, and yes, they probably have expendable energy as well, but in a different way. But the problems that arise from this sudden influx of these these drill workers that come on their own, they're spending a lot of money locally, but they're spending on things like alcohol. There's huge alcohol problems, huge drug problems. Women have reported massive increases of rape and all sorts of social issues. And then what happens is the gas dries up. So they all move on to the next town. And these people are left in a desolate gas field with capped off wells that are unsafe, that are leaking. The methane over these places has been clocked now and is running really, really high. And this is all left. And so you're inundated with people that have a lot of money to spend, have no regard for the area, do not integrate into the community, and as suddenly as they arrive, and it's like a tornado coming through, and it wreaks the same havoc.
Yeah.
They leave, so they leave this behind them.
What amazes me, Louise, is the site up at Harthill. With your help on the phone directing me the other day, I was up there in my car, and it's actually the actual piece of land is between Harthill and a little village called Thorpe, or Thorpe Salvin. Now, Thorpe Salvin is quite a well-to-do village. And as I drove through that village, there is not one sign up anywhere in anybody's window that says, we're against fracking. If you go to Harthill, there are, but the site is actually closer to Thorpe Salvin. And for me, people have got to wake up to this and got to start doing stuff. Got to wake up to it, because it's not coming, it's here.
Absolutely. But quite often what happens is people believe the government rhetoric.
Yes.
We have a standard of safety, but this is just not true. Mm-hmm. The EA, the Health and Safety Executive, the Oil and Gas Authority, they can only legislate. So what happens is, as with us out here at West Newton, if there is an incident, the Environment Agency go in retrospectively. There is no independent person on site monitoring what they're doing. These companies are self-reporting, so they log everything. They send their drilling logs to the Oil and Gas Authority, but they can put whatever they want on these drilling logs. because nobody checks them. How can you check them? There's nobody on site.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody asked me to write a report every day to the police about what my average speed was today when I drove through Sheffield, it's going to be 29 miles an hour because I'm self-policing myself.
Exactly. And how can you have a gold standard when it's like you buy a piece of technology, my laptop, for example, like today. We were all set up for Skype, and then we had a gremlin. Now, all the standards in the world wouldn't have stopped that gremlin.
No.
We could only look at it retrospectively, and that's exactly the same as West Newton. So there was a fire in the well. The well integrity failed. You know, nobody knew the well integrity was going to fail in 2013, but what did Rathlin do? Oh, we did a cement job, is what they said.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see.
Yeah.
No.
Louise, I'm just going to read these couple of. I just want to read these couple of comments out from the chat room, and then we're going to take a music break. There's a where are we? We've read that one. Jabba Trophinol. Here we go. We definitely do not have capitalism. If we had capitalism, the banks would have been wound up in 2008. Yeah. Okay. And there's a link been put in the chat room. This is from Kinder 1111, and it just says this department deals with anti-frackers and classes them as domestic extremists. They also use RIPA orders to apply surveillance to individuals.
Yeah, Ripper orders. Yeah, that's yes, they're interesting. They're the ones that give the police the right to monitor and surveil you every day, everything you do.
Well, what I would say to everybody is, let's everybody get involved in this. Let's everybody be a domestic terrorist, because they can't bloody come after all of us.
Absolutely.
Louise, we're going to take a very short break for some music. I thought quite long and hard tonight about what music I wanted to play. And some people are going to say, oh, this is just noise. Yep, I'm not going to deny that it is just noise. But stick with it, because the last 16 lines of this song virtually say it all. And it's the chorus, really, which is the last 16 lines of this song, which probably mean the most to me. This is Rage Against the Machine, Killing in the Name. Machine, killing in the name. I just love that last 16 lines, which is "fuck you, I won't do what you tell me," and I really do believe that that's what we've got to start doing. They're labelling us all as terrorists, and all we want is to live a peaceful life and be left alone. You know that they change what they class as fracking or whatever bullshit they want to use, and it's not the people who are making all the money that suffer. It's the local people. And I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask our guest tonight, Louise. Louise, are you back with us?
I am, yes.
I want to ask you this question, and I think I know the answer to it. Here we go. Has any shale gas been extracted and sold in the UK up until now?
No.
So what we're saying is we've got people who are ill, whose houses are physically moved, whose families are going to be devastated by, if anything else, the actual traffic that goes through. I mean, I've been up to the Hart Hill site. That little lane, two cars can't pass on it. There are little passing places. So all that's going to be devastated.
And the vehicles they use are huge.
Yep. And I tell you what else I've noticed as well up on that site, Louise. That's that nobody's got a van with Bob's Gas Company or Ineos or Quadrilla or anything like that written on it. They're just benign white vans.
Yeah, and out here at West Newton, when they did the seismic testing, we didn't know. We knew they were going to do it. The map that they submitted to the parish council, because they submitted a map of where they were going to go, we had looked at by an expert on seismic testing who actually worked for a quarry, and he said it wasn't worth the paper it was written on because it no way reflected what they were going to be doing and where they were going to be doing it, and he knew that from the measurements. In 2015, the government subsidised seismic testing to the tune of £20 million. But it's all right, we're under austerity.
Yeah, we're under austerity, and don't forget, it's all self-regulating and self-policing, which, of course, can't possibly go wrong. Well, not for them.
Absolutely not.
It will for us.
Of course. Yeah, and fingers crossed it won't for Hart Hill. But the interesting thing is, you're right, when they did the seismic testing here, we were caught unawares because they bring the stuff on plain white vans, And also, they used vans that had highway maintenance written on the back. You know, with the yellow and black lines, and
Yeah.
all plastered with highway maintenance. And that's what they used. So nobody knew.
I mean, when you and I were
they do
talking on
cover
the
it
phone,
up.
when you and I were talking on the phone the other day, Louise, and I was on that little lane up in Harthill, trying my best to find out where they would. I expected to see tubes stuck out of the ground, but they're not. They're laid on
No.
the ground, covered up by, deep grass that's 2-3 feet high.
And the only thing you will know is you'll see the flags. They put, I mean, they use like a kebab stick, I suppose, really, or a little bamboo thing. They use metal ones out here. I think at Hart Hill they're using wooden ones or metal ones again. But yeah, you just see like little red or yellow flags with a number on, and you'll see lots of them. And that's probably the first indication of where they're going to be doing the seismic testing. But yeah, they came here in plain cars, white vans, and highway maintenance vans. And it is difficult. And, the other caller, going back to the person that said about Amber Rudd, yeah, I mean, what people don't understand is how close they all are. So, for example, Amber Rudd, her brother, is a lobbyist who has energy clients. And he lobbies the department, and she was Secretary of State, SOS, for the Department of Energy and Climate Change. And her brother is the boss of Finbury, which is a huge financial PR and lobbying firm. And this goes right across the board.
Yeah. None of this is by accident. It's just not for our convenience, is it? Just like everything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. And they will do everything in their power. I mean, the thing is, the natural groundswell has been that people don't want hydraulic fracturing, they don't want gas anymore, and they don't want electricity how we get it. People do want renewables, but this government is doing everything it can to stop people getting renewable energy. So, for example, if you have a gas boiler fitted, you get a corgi. Somebody with a corgi license comes in, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's fairly reasonable. The same doesn't apply for renewable energy. You still have to get somebody in, but the government put a huge levy on this, which is why you only get really big corporate companies installing the renewable energy. And they've also reduced the feed-in tariff. So the FIT is now worth virtually nothing. So whatever excess you use that's pumped back into the grid is worth virtually nothing.
Well,
now, we are running more on renewables, but the government skew it.
If somebody said to me that I could have a windmill in my back garden or on my roof and some solar panels on my roof, and that power was mine to use off-grid, I could ring them up and get them to come fit it tomorrow. But that's not what happens, is it?
No. It's a whole rigmarole.
Yeah, you feed it into the grid and get paid pennies on it, and then you have to pay for your electricity and pay pounds for it.
I mean, there are ways of doing it. It is not supposed to be legal, and you don't get a feed-in tariff. But to be honest with you, if you owned your house, there's nothing to stop you setting up the solar panels, getting the battery and getting the inverter and doing it yourself. The big issue is that the batteries are the problem for the storage of the excess. Now, Tesla is producing them on a domestic scale that's just fantastic. However, when he first produced this new lot of batteries, I think in 2016, 15, there was an 18-month waiting list on the first day of sale. And of course, Tesla, and he's building another gigafactory here in Europe, but they automatically dismiss the UK. And it's nothing to do with our weather, because really we call them solar panels, but they should really be called light panels because they pick up light, as opposed to how they were a few years ago when it was just, if it was a really sunny day, you got lots of energy absorbed and processed, and you could run loads of things on it. If it wasn't sunny, you didn't get anything. It doesn't work like that now. There's all sorts of different things you can use. So, it's nothing to do with our rate of sunshine. This is purely commercial.
Yeah. So
and that's why why Tesla doesn't want to come into the UK, because there is no support from government for renewable energy.
We do find that we've got people who come on the show who are here to talk about something. And I've got a great example in the chat room tonight. Gaz Mack was on the other week talking about the homeless people and what a fantastic job they were all doing around Leeds and, well, starting to do it all over the country. And then we find that Gaz Mack tonight is in the chat room and he's posting pictures of how he's been to Harthill. Now, he lives nowhere near Harthill, yet he's brought it upon himself to come down here and actually do more than a lot of the local people are doing. So, well, one thing, Gaz Mack, more strength to you, mate. Thank you very much indeed. And, of course, Kinder runs Truth Juice up in Hull. I'll give you a shout-out as well. What can we do, Louise? We've got people from Leeds and Hull coming down to a site which is kind of between Worksop and Sheffield. Harthill, if that's the way I could easily describe it. We've got people who live around the corner doing nothing. And we've got people who know about this stuff coming from miles away to try and do something about it. What do we do?
I think it's difficult. It's difficult. At Harthill, you've got a really good group of active people at Harthill. They need lots more support. But I think one of the issues is people, as I said, believe the rhetoric. And I go very lightly with YouGov, because obviously YouGov is very much a conservative-owned, run poll site. It asks you questions, you sign up to it. It's it is quite right-wing, and their latest YouGov poll says that 18% now of the population support fracking. 31% oppose it, and 51% either have no opinion because they're uninformed or unsure. People do not know what to expect from it. They believe the government when they say, oh, it's not going to be like it was in America. It's going to be lovely out here.
One thing I'd love to say to those people is, every time I turn on the radio and the news comes up, as it does on the hour, every hour, and they say 90-odd% of people think this. Well, I know that's bollocks, because nobody fucking asked me. Nobody asked me, so how do they know? They just say what is actually convenient for them.
Yeah, and that is really interesting, because YouGov, obviously, you subscribe to YouGov, and then they feed out intermittently questionnaires to people. And they are quite selective as well, I think, even though they say it's random. But interestingly enough, before Christmas, the Telegraph ran a straightforward, do you support or do you propose fracking? Now, at the last count, 92% were opposing it. The Telegraph took that down and never published it.
But the other thing, of course, is what they now class as fracking is, so out there that all this stuff that they're doing that is fracking doesn't class as fracking. So, they just confuse the issue all over the way anyway.
And what it does, it gives the oil and gas companies license to say, we are not fracking.
Yeah.
And this is what INEOS have said at Harthill. We are not fracking. Out here, we are not fracking.
Well, I'm going to come out with one of my. I'm going to come out with a cliche that I stole, as I did most of them. If it barks and it's got 4 legs, it's a fucking dog. And we should call this out and call it what it is, and don't let them get away with them saying, "Oh, it's not fracking." It's not. It bloody well is. I don't care what label they stick on it. That's what it is.
I know, and it is so political. The Conservatives have a massive vested interest on a personal level in this. Now, interestingly enough, Jeremy Corbyn is fully aware of what David Cameron did in the Infrastructure Act and what Theresa May is trying to do in her Queen's speech on Wednesday, which we think will keep in. One of the bits, the only bit she's going to keep in, is to say we are going to remove planning permission. Jeremy Corbyn knows this, and obviously the Green Party do. The Lib Dems are against it. The SNP, there's a moratorium in Scotland against it. So depending what happens on Wednesday, we could be in a whole different ballgame. If the Conservatives get this through, we are going to have to fight it. Now, 38 Degrees are I suppose a charity really that do campaigns for people where you can subscribe, you can sign a petition, and that is presented to government. Now, on Monday of last week, the Conservative Party had a meeting behind closed doors at which they said, we will no longer take or listen to anything that 38 Degrees or any of these other organisations that are petitioners say to us.
So in other words,
you can...
Sorry, go on, Louise, sorry.
I was going to say, you could have 500,000 people sign a petition that in the past had been presented at Parliament and they had to do something about it, is now going to be totally ignored.
And not only that, you're going to be labelled as a terrorist, so they can just come and lock you up.
Yeah, now you have to be quite active to be locked up, but yes.
Yeah, but Louise, you've been locked up. You've been there and done that.
For no reason, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. It is hard. And I can understand why people, out here at West Newton, and I always come back to West Newton because this is where I've campaigned so hard. But in those little villages around there, Marton, Spraughtley, West Newton, Ellaby, even out here at Skirler, we've had a massive lull since 2014 where we've battled planning and we've battled all sorts. We've fought the seismic testing, all going through court. We are battle weary and we are just thankful for the respite. And people are just sitting in their houses going, when is it going to start again? We can't think about it. We've just got to carry on doing what we do in our daily lives. And I guess that's how most people feel. Because until you see it, until you hear the noise, you smell the gas, and you see the amount and the volume and the size of the traffic that comes through these villages. Ellaby was closed for 8 hours a day whilst these convoys were coming through. People weren't allowed to drive their car off their drive. There was a policeman stationed outside every house.
I hope there's station one outside my house.
There'll be nothing you can do. Even if you say, I do not consent, because it's infrastructure, you will be classed as a terrorist and you have to do what they say. Otherwise, they will just arrest you and put you in the cells for the day.
I've got a different view to this. And it simply is this. Fuck them. Let's all stand there and let's all be terrorists because they can't arrest all of us. So don't let's be scared of this. Let's deal with this. We all have to stand together.
Game. Yeah, it is purely a numbers game. They've won out in Australia at Bentley purely on numbers. We have to stand together.
It's the same old story. There's not many of them and there's lots of us. But it only takes lots of us to be scared of a few of them for them to get what they want. But it's time to stop it. Because if the station of a copper outside my house, I guarantee that Monday night there won't be a Raconteurs 2 show because I will be in a cell. And I hope my neighbours with me.
For you.
and I hope everybody down my streets with me because hopefully we'll clog up the system that much and it'll make such noise because that's what we need. That's what we need. We need everybody to stand together. And I'm prepared to be arrested. I don't care. What, they're just going to feed and water me for 2 or 3 days? What do they do? We've all got to do
No,
this.
but the thing is, we have. But what you're looking at, especially in these rural areas, and you know yourself, where I am in Holderness is very rural.
Yes.
We struggle with internet. These people have lived their own lives. Most of them have never even written a letter of complaint. So getting people from the point where they've never seen anything like this before to the point where they're all standing outside with placards, trust me, it comes. When those vehicles started rolling through Ellaby, there was people on the side of that road crying.
Yep.
They could not believe what was being done. Now, in 2013, this all went under the radar. They thought they were drilling for water. Nobody knew. The volume of the trucks kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. For just to build the compound and the access road at West Newton alone involves 2,000 vehicle movements nearly. I think over 2,000. But we're not talking small vehicles. We're talking high-abs, tankers, great big huge flatbed. And then on top of this, and not included in any of this, is the police, the drill workers, the workers that they're going to bring in to do the site. So you've got all these cars as well. The volume of traffic is immense, and people cannot understand this. And when the site is up and running, they're bringing in the water tankers to extract the wastewater. They're shipping the chemicals in. Now, the mixture of chemicals you get, I could name them all for you, but you have irritants, poisons, toxic. You also have the radioactive substances, the americium, beryllium, and the cesium, which are done by nuclear fission. And they're brought in on the back of low loaders in little lead boxes. And this is what they're making dirty bombs from. You know, this is coming through our country lanes. The liquid nitrogen they brought in vast quantities in cylinders. Because they couldn't get the well to flow, they had to stimulate the well in a different way. They brought in liquid nitrogen. And then you're talking innumerable cylinders of liquid nitrogen. And this is all being driven down our little country lanes. Some of it comes from Aberdeen, some from Schlumberger, some of it comes from Belgium through the ports. And there was 2 chemical spills in Ellaby that were covered up really, really quickly. And the damage alone to the infrastructure is huge. So your roads get churned up. We still have problems on the corner at Ellaby where the big lorries and the tankers were coming round, where they've actually affected the water and the drains. And nobody is taking responsibility. Nobody takes responsibility for this.
Coming to a town near you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and when you see it, it's horrific. You will never forget it. People out here, were kept awake 24 hours a day with the noise of the drilling. The light pollution is unbelievable. And of course, all this causes a dead zone for wildlife as well. So you get nothing. The birds will die. The bats die. Even the moths and the flies go away. It is literally a dead zone.
Mm. Louise, when I first started to do Raconteurs 2, I hadn't coined a phrase. I just reflected on something that was I was trained to do when I was in the finance industry. And that was to come up with an elevator statement. An elevator statement is something you say, one quick sentence that tells somebody something without their eyes rolling back and them getting bored. So, as an example, when I was in financial services, my elevator statement was, I provide cost-effective financial solutions for people just like you. If we apply that to whatever they want to call it, but fracking, what can we say to people, one-liner, that's going to wake people up and make them think? What could we use as a slogan, a banner, a poster? Call it what you want. What can we say to people?
Oh, I really don't know. I would guess it has to be something along the lines of, what would you say to your children and your grandchildren when they have finished destroying our Earth? Where were you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where were you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what it boils down to. What did you do? Did you stand back or did you try and fight? And how can people live knowing that they couldn't even be asked to write a letter?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could up sticks tomorrow. I live in a rented place. I could up sticks tomorrow and move far away from this fracking site. And at this moment in time, I've got no intention of doing that.
No.
Because I'd rather like to think that there was part of this world left for my grandkids to enjoy. And I've never been a tree hugger. Ever. But this is serious stuff. This really is serious stuff. But you're right, you know, what are you going to say to your grandkids when they say, Grandad, Grandma, where were you? Yeah, I was stood in the lane crying when it was too late.
And I think as well, you do have to remember that until you experience it, you can have no idea. And it is heartbreaking. I can't even tell you what they do to drive this through. They lie, continually lie, and they turn everything around. So if you are fighting it on a big scale, you know, if you're actively involved in the letter writing and the campaigning, they give you such platitudes and lies. And you, in the end, you begin to think, you doubt yourself so much. I mean, when I was doing all my research and investigation and writing about this stuff, over and over again, Rathlin, my MP, the council, they called me a liar. And I'm standing here thinking, am I going mad? Is this really, am I missing something here? You know, on the one hand, you're telling me we did not poison the wildlife. But in the other hand, so on one hand, I've got a statement from Rathlin saying, you lied, we did not poison the wildlife. In the other hand, I've got a letter from Rathlin saying to the council, we are using rodenticide to poison the wildlife. And you begin to think, I'm going mad. Because you cannot understand, and the volume of pressure they put on you is huge. They single you out as troublemakers, as a liar, you know, as somebody, the one that they bring in all the time. We're the experts. You don't know anything. That's the thing they will say to you continually. We know what we're doing. You know nothing about it. You're just a slightly concerned citizen, and patronize you away. Don't listen to them. Fight it tooth and nail with everything you have. And if you've only got 10 minutes, write a letter. It's 10 minutes of your time. You will have done something. If everybody took 10 minutes, an hour out of their time that lived locally within a 20-mile radius to write into the council, they will have done something that will support in supporting stopping this.
We all have to become Spartacus.
Absolutely. And, you know, who can't afford an hour out of their week just to write a letter, to do a little bit of investigating? Hart Hill residents are putting information together for people. They've got a Facebook page. Join it. Hart Hill Against Fracking. It's that simple. And if you're not on Facebook, eventually I will get their website up and running. But, you know, there will be information evenings. There are people you can contact. Find it. Even if you only make a Facebook site just to go on Hart Hill Against Fracking, you know, you will get the updates from Hart Hill about what is happening. Or set up, we have emails, and because a lot of the people out here don't have internet, they don't have a computer, they're not tech savvy, most of them haven't even got a mobile phone. We set up a phone tree so we could keep each other informed. And people coordinating the campaign out here knew who didn't have phones, because we all know each other. We're small communities. So They would just go knock on the door and say, oh, there's a meeting on such and such a date. Don't forget, put it in your diary. And everybody would turn up. In the little village of Ellaby, it's tiny. You know, there's maybe 30, 40 houses, if that. And people were coming to those meetings when the site was active. We would be getting 90, 100 people crammed into a little Methodist church.
Yeah, there was a meeting a few weeks ago at the other site that's not far from me at Marsh Lane, and twice they had to change the location to a bigger hall. They were expecting about 40 or 50 people, and about 300 turned up.
Exactly, and people are becoming more and more aware.
I've got a couple of comments I want to read out, and I've just read the first line of this one. Sorry, before I read that one, I'm just going to read one from Tony Hurst. Tony Hurst says he thinks the water's got a lot to do with it. We'll come to that one in a moment, Louise. Here's one from Mithrin. Greater Manchester Police has a population of 2.8 million, policed by 8,000 bobbies, divided by 5 blocks, and assuming you catch the overlap, you have about 2,500 bobbies out and about, doing 650, with about 650 doing admin and custody, etc. So each cop is policing over 1,000 people. So, you know, if you want to do something about this, I ain't scared of getting arrested. And all it takes is 2 other people down my street to not be bothered about getting arrested for this. They can label me whatever they want, because my grandkids are more important than that.
I know, and the thing is, they will bus these police in huge numbers. When the first of those big convoys rolled in that June, there was 3 of us down at that well site and a dog. And this is not including the police that were stationed outside everybody's gate at West Newton and the police that were stationed outside the houses in Ellaby on the route. Now, for 3 of us and a dog, we had over 120 police. 120. We think, and we're sure, and I've done a lot of investigation for this, we think that we must be in the Guinness Book of Records for the most police per protester in the whole of the world. I mean, they will throw everything they have at it. And believe me, they will do things that you wouldn't even dream about.
Yeah.
You will never see the police brutality that happened on Barton Moss, that's going on at Preston New Road, where they pulled somebody out of their wheelchair. They get brutal, absolutely brutal, because that is their remit. West Newton was slightly different. We didn't have any of this aggro, mainly because there was never enough numbers, and the police wouldn't let us walk the trucks. They just had us under what they call trade union rules. Normally when they arrest you, they give you a 5-step warning. Out at West Newton, we didn't have a 5-step warning in the beginning. We were just lifted under what they call trade union rules, and they just came along and arrested you. So, for example, you would last, if you tried to walk the truck, you would last, I would hazard a guess, under 5 seconds before they arrested you. So they will throw everything they have at it. But the police out at West Newton, to be fair, most of them were anti-fracking, and most of them, although we have a thing about keep them at arm's length, don't talk to them, because they are gathering information on us. There is no doubt about that. But there's, you know, we had to do things in a different way at West Newton. We didn't have the numbers. And as I said, most of the residents are elderly. They'd come and visit camp. We were always busy at camp in those days, you know. One Saturday I had over 130 people down there visiting. Huge numbers, showing solidarity and support. And everybody that drives down has their photograph taken, their registration plate taken by security. The police are monitoring you 24 hours a day. They come up and down in the riot vans, and the riot vans are full. They're parked in little country lanes. It's crazy. The amount of money they throw at this is unbelievable.
Yeah. Louise, I want to try and finish on some positives.
On a good note.
Yeah, yes. It is difficult because this is big. And the biggest point is they've not actually pulled any bloody gas out the ground, and we've already got people ill. We've already got people whose houses have been destroyed, whose lives have been destroyed. And this is all coming to a town near you. So it's not easy to pull a positive, but one positive I can say from this, I don't know if people remember the miners' strike.
Yeah,
well, the biggest battle fought in the miners' strike, as far as I remember, was at Orgreave.
Orgreave.
Well, Orgreave is probably, I don't know, certainly 5 or 6 miles as the crow flies from Marsh Lane and maybe 8 miles from Harthill. The people in this area, when they do get pissed off, boy, do they get pissed off. And for me, it has got to be a case of, we've all got to stand together, not be violent. But if they choose to be violent, we've got to, be willing to stand, and some of us take it. Because they can't arrest all of us. They can't arrest all of us. It's impossible.
No, they can't.
So let's not have 3 people and a dog and 120 coppers. Let's have 3,000 people and 120 coppers and see what happens that day.
Yes.
And then everybody have your mobile phone out, and everybody start videoing and start sending it to radio stations and start sending it to TV. Somebody somewhere will cover it. Somebody somewhere will cover it.
Absolutely. And alternative media now means that a lot of the mainstream press that we so associate with reporting, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the Guardian, the Independent, to be fair, the Guardian, they are quite good. BBC, forget them. Things like Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn's campaign have proved that more and more mainstream media is being sidelined. We've got some great alternative stuff coming through. There's yourself on Raconteurs News. There's also things like the Canary. Canary are absolutely brilliant. The online newspaper, the Canary, Squawk Box, any of these, these alternatives, because Twitter, much more so, I think, than Facebook, Twitter is instant. People are spreading it. They're sharing stuff. It spreads like wildfire. We saw this with Momentum. Alternative media is now the way forward.
Yeah. I've got it. Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading a message from Gaz Mack. Police are just corporate puppets. Yep, and so are the politicians, because they're not the ones pulling the strings. They're not the ones pulling.
No, absolutely not. No, they're just the mouthpieces for it. And you see, the Queen can quite happily say, oh, they can frack on my island. That's because her land isn't covered under pedal licenses. And nor are people like Andrea Leadsom, who live in Northamptonshire, round the corner from David Montague-Smith, who's the chair of Frackling Energy. These people are not covered by fracking, not because they don't have shale gas, because it's so selective.
Yeah.
We are the desolate north, according to them. They can do what they want to us. And it's time we stopped being the desolate north and stood up and said, do you know what? Enough is enough now.
Yeah, I was going to call this frack off, but for me, they can fuck off. I don't want anybody to get violent. That's the last thing I want. But
violence is never the answer.
No, it's not. But if we stand up in big enough numbers, if they become violent, then, that's them doing the wrong, not us. But we need to stand together.
Absolutely, and we do. And the thing is, they treat people like myself, who are seen as perhaps an outside agitator, although I do live here, but are seen as very vocal, a bit argumentative maybe sometimes. We are treated differently to residents.
Yeah.
Residents are who've never done anything before. They do have a little bit more respect for them. And Hart Hill is classic, because down those little lanes, if there's enough people standing there, park their cars there, they will not get those trucks through.
No.
And there will be nothing. The police will not start ragging around. These 60, 70-year-old pensioners are ideal.
Yeah.
Pensioners. But out here again at Walkington, the first 2 people that were arrested were pensioners. And they sat in the road meditating, and they were arrested. So, that you're not immune. But if you're right, if there's big enough numbers, they cannot stop you. And it is purely a numbers game.
I've thought about what we've discussed tonight and what my reaction's been, and I'm angry. I am angry. And I'm not just angry for me because I happen to live here, because I could up sticks and move tomorrow. I'm in a rented accommodation. I could just go. It's not an issue. But I'm angry because the elite bastards and their puppets just don't even give us any value. We're not worth anything. We are just collateral damage.
Absolutely. We are the great unwashed.
Now,
peasants.
The part of alternative media that I hate is the fear media, the Alex Jones. And if we've done any of that tonight, I'd rather see it not as the fear, but kicking you off your safe little perch, kicking you into somewhere where you feel a little bit uncomfortable. And if that's what we've achieved tonight, then great. If we've installed fear into you, then I am sorry, but hopefully that'll give you the momentum to talk to somebody else about it. Which brings me to the last thing I want to cover in the last sort of few minutes, Louise, if we can.
Yeah.
When we've talked before, you've said that you have a 2-hour speech that you sort of go into a village and say, look, this is what they're going to do.
Yes.
Have you got any of these little elevator statements and that you can pull from that you can just quickly share with us? Because we've got probably 6-7 minutes left. But I want to try and finish on something positive that we can say to people to get things moving, not just at Harthill and Marsh Lane, but all over the country where this is going to happen.
My one thing is, we thought it was a done deal out here at West Newton. Planning was given for West Newton B for 2 more well sites at the compound they were going to call West Newton B, which was much bigger than West Newton A, and an access road, a 1.4 kilometre access road. Now, there was also permission given. That was on June the 4th, 2015. In December, they gave planning permission, an extension to planning for the second well at West Newton A. Now, this was passed by the council, and Rathlin had all their permits in place to start at West Newton B. We knew they were going to start in September because they'd already visited residents and said, we will be closing the roads. Where you live, we will close the roads in September. They will be closed for 13 months from September 2016. Now, they had all their permits in place except the archaeology permit. We know Rathlin are struggling financially because they're owned by Connaught Oil and Gas, which is a Canadian company that are in huge financial difficulties. Now, it was, as far as we were concerned, it was a done deal. Rathlin had been and told residents they were closing the road in September. Work was going to be starting for 13 months. They'd done the archaeology test trenches. They'd done the seismic testing. All the permits were in place from the Environment Agency, the Health and Safety Executive, from the council. It was a done deal. But do you know what? We won. We beat them. They didn't start work in September because we held them up on the strength of some phone calls and some emails about the archaeology. It was quite intensive for a few weeks, but we got a stop on it. Now, that stop was long enough that Rathlin ran out of money. Now, we've heard the latest from Rathlin is we will not be starting work until at least December 2017. Every day that passes, Connaught Oil and Gas are hemorrhaging money. They are not drilling anywhere. So every day we held them up was a day they didn't put a drill in the ground or a spade or even get a truck through. So, you know, you can think that there is nothing left for you, that you've done everything you can, the permits are in place, everything has been passed and they're ready to go. But, you know, sometimes you can just hold them up long enough that they aren't going to start work. And every day that you hold them up is a day that costs them. Every battle you fight costs them a huge amount of money. In the courts, when they try and evict camps, with the policing bills from Barton Moss, out here the police didn't have to be paid because they classed it as training. But, you know, every little thing you do makes a huge difference. So I would say to people, no, do not give up. I didn't give up. We didn't give up. We have fought and fought and fought them. And when there was nothing left, we grasped the last straw. And it was the last straw that we won on. So there's always hope.
That's awesome. Just want to read a couple of comments off the chat room. Mithrin, if you stand up in numbers, that may trigger a massive Fiat terrorist event, which will usher in martial law. Oh, just watch the BBC at the moment, you know, watch all the social cleansing they're getting on with. Yeah, martial law. Yeah. It's here now. It's here now. It's not coming. It's here. And as Tony Hurst says, looks to me that's what they want. And also, that's all the bullshit they're chucking out on the BBC at the moment anyway. That's what's happening. This is here. This isn't coming. It's here. I've got one final question for you, Louise. I've got one final question for you. Well, it's a two-part question. Is there anywhere you're going to give your 2-hour talk in the near future, or anywhere it can be viewed online?
It's not online. I did do a little bit at Hart Hill. They want to bring me back later in the year, and I haven't been able to get hold. I've had loads of techie issues, but my techie issues, whilst the Skype isn't resolved, a lot of them are resolved. I've got other issues as well, you know, where I'm trying to move house and things. But if somebody wants to book a hall, just contact yourself or whatever. I will happily come and stand up and talk. The presentations may be an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then I do a question and answer session for people afterwards. Basically what I do is what went wrong at West Newton A, take you through the bit of the planning, the drilling. It's I think it's interesting. Other people have thought it's been interesting. I've done it a few times now, and nobody's ever gone away and said, oh God, that was really awful. Everybody's always really interested and wants to ask lots of questions. So yeah, you want me to come and talk? I'll talk anywhere.
Right. Well, I think what we need to do
I'll bring my little mate Kinder.
I think what we need to do is get a hall booked. What we need to do is get a little hall booked, get it on video, and then we'll get it on everybody's YouTube channel that we can possibly think of, and we'll put it up on the Raconteurs News website as well. Well, Louise, that brings us to the end, but what I want to ask is, if somebody's listening tonight and there's one website that they can go to find out about fracking and what it actually is, where would you send them?
Well, if they're interested in what's happening locally, I suppose the UK Frack Off website gives you a list of all the groups, what is happening. They've got a little news thing. They do updates, Frack Off. And then there's lots of really good. Go and have a look at Preston New Road on the file. They've got Facebook, website. But Frack Off's probably your first port of call in the UK.
Brilliant. Louise, as always, you've been amazing. If we can just hang on at the end of the show, because I just want to have a quick chat with you off air. But before we wrap up tonight, I just want to tell everybody what's happening here at raconteursnews.com. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, 8 till 10 with Jason Holmes with Raconteurs News. I'm not sure who his guest is tomorrow night, actually. I forgot to ask him before we came on air. I'll be back next Monday live, 7 till 9 UK time, with my nocturnal Australian friend, Rob Halford. Yes, loads of requests for Rob to come back. And, I've just been told tomorrow night, Max Egan with Jason Holmes, 8 till 10 UK time. That's definitely going to be one to have a listen to. Max has always got some very, very interesting information. That's tomorrow night, 8 till 10 on raconteursnews.com. And as I say, next week, I'll have Rob Halford back on. We always get loads of requests for Rob. His delivery is amazing. In the meantime, you can listen to all the previous shows on raconteursnews.com or just follow the link to the podcasts. If you've got something to share or something you want to say, something you don't agree with what I've said, don't sit there saying it. Come on and say it to us. We're not all here to agree with each other. We are all going to have differences. And that's what this platform's all about. Let's share our information, and it's all about changing somebody else's perspective on life, and hopefully for the better, because this world really does belong to all of us. I just want to say thanks to my producer tonight, Andy Young, and to Kev, who worked tirelessly before the show to get everything sorted out for us. And most of all, thanks to my guest, Louise Castro. As always, amazing. And most of all, thanks to everybody for listening tonight. We're going to play out with a track from Dick Jackson. This is Drug Free and High on Life.
Stay Steve.